over to the cloud. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 7th 2022 edition of the Kubernetes Public Steering Committee meeting. I'll start off by noting that we abide by the CNCF Code of Conduct, so please be excellent to each other. This meeting will also be recorded and posted to YouTube. We have an agenda and we have some items on it, so we're going to jump right into those. Paris, I think you have the first one.
All right. Hello, everyone. I just wanted to give an update that we do have a governing board meeting in April. And the process for getting things on the agenda is we have to email the ED Priyanka and Chair Arun and get our topics on the agenda. Right now, I know we are working on a few of those, but this is just kind of a reminder. Right now, we've got topics that involve legal, sustainability, and some other things. So our next meeting, I think that will be the meeting that we'll start really finessing those so that we can get prepared. But we need to, I have a meeting with Arun and Priyanka at the end of the month. So we just need to get our topics in by then. So that's pretty much it. So you'll hear more from me in the next coming days so that we can get those squared away.
Perfect. Thank you, Paris. Does anybody have any questions for Paris before we move on?
Paris, are there documents that you are working on or be through it? I remember writing something up last week.
Yeah.
Do you want to get them out in public or?
Yep. Let's finesse those first and work on them this week, and then we'll get those out.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, great. There's no other questions. We'll move on to the next topic. Evaluate CDNs for Kubernetes releases and other artifacts. This one is on you, Dims.
So Eddie, yeah, sorry, Eddie had mentioned in the chat that he's jumping between meetings, so just give him a shout before we start this one up.
Eddie, are you there? Okay, good. Thank you.
He's here. Yeah.
So Arnaud, do you want to introduce or would you like me to introduce?
I can do that.
Yeah, please go.
Okay, hi everyone. So I opened the subject really to artifact management in general. We don't currently, the project produces 3 types of artifacts: binaries, system packages, and container images. Right now, ownership is partially shared between Google and us. In the future, we plan to migrate that to the community infrastructure. And before we do that, I would like to make sure those artifacts are distributed by a third party, because it costs us a lot to distribute, to be the solid distributor of those artifacts. So I want to basically reach out to Fastly or Cloudflare and basically have a deep look in their open source program and see what fits us best in the future. I'm thinking about 5 to 10 years, because we suppose Kubernetes is going to be around for a long time. This is not a new practice. Basically, I list a few open source projects. They've been doing this for years. I'm talking about the Linux, the kernel project, the Debian project, Nix OS, and even Alpine distribution. So it's not something new. We just basically, so what I'm asking to steering is apply to this program on the behalf of the community, and we can initiate a conversation with those CDN providers.
Eddie, did you have anything to say here?
No, nothing specific. I just wanted us to really make sure that we set the stage when talking to these CDN providers so we don't surprise them with a massive production workload when they're generously offering open source stuff.
Yeah, so I did open up an issue against Kubernetes, I think, asking if we could collect some stats on the downloads of at least the K8s binaries and things like that. So that we might need to beef up some of things like that to enumerate the costs where we are facing costs and the size of the artifacts and which releases and are very popular and things like that, I guess.
Just to clarify, I'm not talking only about the KK repo. I'm talking about every sub-project inside the Kubernetes organization, because we have one sub-project that costly a lot to distribute that. Bob has his hand raised.
So, yep. My question, like, I'm all for exploring these options. The one thing is that both Fastly and oh god, I'm totally brain farting the other one right now. Cloudflare will use the trademark and project name in, like, they will list on their open source page and elsewhere. I am personally okay with that because they're just listing the open source projects that use it. But is that something we would have to go to the CNCF for?
Right. So the plan, what we were trying to discuss there was one of us, hopefully me, because I have some context, will go talk to, start with Cloudflare, right? And then try to get a list of expectations from, between the two of us. What would they like to see from us, and what we can offer, and what is the kind of information that they will ask us. I'll point them to GCS buckets and whatnot to give them an idea of what is involved in this process, and how much cost we are paying and something like that. Once and then I can put together a proposal which will go to everybody here. Like, it'll go to steering, it'll go to CNCF, it'll go to SIG release and get sign-offs, and then we do anything after that. So I'm not going to sign up for, hey, Cloudflare, starting day after tomorrow, just move things over or anything like that unilaterally. So we'll formulate a plan and then we'll execute the plan. Go ahead, Jordan.
That pretty much addressed my question. I saw Stephen had tagged in SIG release. I wanted to make sure that, I think it's great for us to sort of represent the project to these organizations if this is something we want to do, but getting the stats and making sure with SIG release that this is what we want to do. I'm +1 for getting that plan in place and everyone kind of on the same page before we move on. So that's
I think that's fine. I would say I think based on the read through, my understanding is that we have, or maybe the CNCF has pre-existing relationships with Fastly. Does it make sense to route through them first, or have the conversation there first?
Yeah, I'll talk to Spanish check also before I figure out which one to go first, or maybe I can do multiple in parallel.
Yeah.
Just for clarification, basically, Fastly has a partnership with the Linux Foundation, so not directly with CNCF.
Also, going into, we'll have to take into factor is which is the easiest for us to do, right? Like, for example, if one of them can work off of the GCS buckets, then it's literally less work on our side. So we'll have to take technical considerations also to, and if Fastly says, oh, you have to jump through these 3-5 hoops, and you have to make a bunch of changes in image promoter or whatever, just throwing it out, right? Then we would say, hey, this is just too much stuff and we can't handle it, and it's going to be a while before we get any gains out of it. So then it becomes a non-starter at that point. But the main thing is collect as much information from as many of these as possible, so that we can come to a good plan and a backup plan kind of thing. The other thing that we were talking about in the meeting was like small reversible steps was one of the philosophy that we were going in for. So how much of this will be, things that we can roll back and come back to, the state we are today? That will also play some role in the consideration.
Yeah,
So my question.
Switch over where we sort of did one step at a time and actually had to roll back several times. So yeah, avoiding one big bang type moves is great.
I specifically have a question around evaluation criteria. It sounds like there's been some thought put into already from Sid Kate's infra, like what considerations are going to go into something like this. Are those written down somewhere? Because I think those would be a good thing to have written down prior to having the conversations with, potential vendors. I guess I'm viewing this kind of as a vendor thing, even though we're applying for a potentially zero like monetary cost program, but there may be exchanges of other things like, rights to use the trademark and certain marketing materials and that kind of stuff. So it still feels like a vendor-y thing to me. So I'm wondering if we have any of the criteria written down prior to having those conversations with Cloudflare, Fastly, or anyone else.
We have some data that we can pull together, but we don't have what we can offer as an incentive to them, right? We don't have that kind of information where we say, hey, you can do this, we'll put you in the Kubernetes website or whatever, right? We haven't thought about those things yet. I'm hoping that at least Cloudflare has half a dozen open source projects under them, and they might already have a set of things they ask of each project. So I think we'll end up starting there.
Yeah, I think that's good. And like the other thing that just like again clicks in with my mind around this is there anything as far as tie-ins around, like in particular in the what we can offer question? We have like the infrastructure credits program through the CNCF, which that may be at least like a good initial guideline of like what things we would potentially even like talk about on. Yeah, so I'm wondering, like, because again, even if the monetary cost is zero, if it's like exchanged for open source, like if we're pushing a bunch of this CDN traffic through anywhere, it's going to be a not insignificant financial cost on whatever partner we go with, or whatever partner would accept us into that program. Like this may, yeah, I just see it being very big, and us wanting to understand what we're talking about prior to necessarily going into those conversations.
Yeah, those are definitely prior art, Christoph. The Cloud Credits program and the announcements and things like that. And the other prior art also is like the Google itself, right? Like the $3 million. So there is some prior art that we can refer to when we talk to them. But I'm hoping that I don't know. It's going to be discovery phase at this point, right? So Hippie Hacker is not well, since last week. So I'll not be able to talk to him. So I want to initiate the conversation via an email or filling up a form, and then see where it goes from there.
Okay, that makes sense. I think Eddie was next.
Yeah, Eddie.
Do we have a place where we wanted to start getting those requirements together? Because I know a few things came up for qualifying vendors. Is this where we want to consider Great Firewall of China, right? That was something on our list. So do we find a vendor that supports that, or yeah?
So Arno, can you start a doc in somewhere where we can start writing these things down?
Yeah, that's why I raised my my hands just to say I'm gonna open an issue and try to have a basic list of requirement we want to basically establish before we start the technical conversation. And about period, I put the link of the Apache Foundation history, and there are, I think, 5 times our size in terms of egress, so I'm not really worried about that. We also, just to clarify to what Jim said, we can get information about the binaries we distribute right now, but we are blind when it's come to Google infrastructure because we basically need to have inside Google to make those requests. I wanted to wait before do that, but because last week was perf review inside Google, so it was very complicated to get people to talk to people. So I opened the issue without those information. But you're right, Christoph. We should basically collect the different technical requirements before we start technical conversation with them. So the issue is basically be sure we start the conversation. Even we need to talk about trademarks. I don't know, marketing requirement before we even start the implementation.
It's always perf somewhere, so
yeah.
don't wait. It's fine to be patient, but yeah, throw it in a queue and ping as needed. Yeah, whatever random issues we can open or docs, just link it back to that main one so that there's a breadcrumb. We can kind of see everything that's going on with this.
Okay.
So I have one question on scope that came up from that, Arno, and it's, are we looking at only covering things that have already moved over to community, or covering things that are still on Google infrastructure? I would just to interject, so there's not a lot of back and forth. My thought would be we should cover what's in community infrastructure, and that can be an incentive for Google to help us migrate the things that migrate out of Google infrastructure. That's at least my initial thought, but curious if CK's Infra has already had thoughts on that subject.
So
you're absolutely right about this. Basically, my first, let's say, sub project I want to try with is COPS. Right now, COPS use 20K, 22,000 months just for distribution inside the community infrastructure per month. And basically, this is a cost I would like to basically delegate to a third party because it will help us get some room to finish some other migration step. And after we basically deal with everything inside the community infrastructure, we can start to look at everything inside the Google infrastructure. So basically, if we succeed to use a CDN provider with, for example, COPS, and basically have an observation period over 2 to 3 months, we can start the conversation with everything inside Google. When I'm talking about system packages and binaries. So we have an idea of what it costs us if we want to use a cloud provider and what's the, let's say, rollback plan for this initiative.
So, I mean, one, I think that, if we don't have, I think we should get an issue open in funding or something, just to track this. Because I think we've got things kind of scattered across like Kates.io and KK. We should get something in funding because I think this kind of like goes both ways. I think some of the technical stuff is included in one of the or two of the KEPs that are currently open. So we've got some content to riff off of there. In terms of like what we should move first, I agree that COPS is a good test for at least like artifact promotion, like from the file promotion side, because they're one of the only ones who are doing it. I know that there are a few places in SIG storage that are interested in file promotion, and we kind of haven't been able to do anything for them because of like either the system's not set up or like we don't have a process to route them through. So there have been a few things on the queue that just cannot be done. From the SIG release side, I think that a simple use case and a harder use case need to sort of run in parallel. SIG release is effectively in a split brain scenario where like we run the release process in Google infrastructure and write the container images to community infrastructure, but all of the other artifacts stay on Google infrastructure. There's a huge cost behind those artifacts that we don't have visibility into because it's not on community infrastructure. So we need to find a way to try to do both. Being able to solve for those artifacts means we're going to be able to do a lot more cooler things in SIG release. So maybe bias, maybe personal interest, but I'd like to see the SIG release stuff happen too.
I think it's about. Yeah, go for it.
I was just gonna say, Stevens, that yeah, like I think it sounds like SIG release needs to collaborate with SIG-Kate's infra on this requirements doc to kind of understand some of this stuff, because what it sounds like is we're not 100% clear on scope, and there may be some reasons that we want to expand or contract the scope in either direction. But collaboration between the two groups definitely sounds warranted.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's already happening. So like I think one of the blockers has been we can't do anything new on community infrastructure until we have the solve for like image distribution, right? But there has been the need for years essentially to move this over to community infrastructure, but we're effectively blocked. So definitely happy to continue collaborating on requirements. Really for us, it's the file promotion capabilities. It's the artifact. It's artifact distribution both on the both from the file tarball perspective, but also the deb and RPM packages. And the additional difficulty from the deb and RPM packages is that effectively deb and RPM package management is like a managed service for us today, if you will, right? Googlers are handling that, right? So there's a combination of like wanting to do it, but also knowing that that's an additional workload that the team would have to take on as a result of moving over to community infrastructure. So I want to be careful how we take it on.
Also, Stephen, we might have to end up increasing the priority on signing of the deb and RPMs if we need to bring that into the community hands, and then community publishes it, and then gets into the CDN from there.
Yeah, so the signing does not happen until we are on community infrastructure, because right now it's signed with Google signing keys. So until it's with us, we can't do that.
Yeah, so there is like various combinations of things that need to line up, ducks in a row, right?
Oh, the signing's happening. At least for the image stuff. The crew has been working on a bunch of stuff on the image signing route. So we have a lot of the capabilities to sign artifacts today. We're just not doing it for the debs and RPMs, and we can't do it for the debs and RPMs.
Okay, so I'm gonna step in for a second. I don't want us to get like too technically in the weeds, like discussing those technical details here, just because we know the groups that need to talk.
Wrong meeting, yeah, exactly.
Just want to keep us focused on the particular steering considerations here. Arnaud, you have if anybody else want to speak on this before we move on? I think if I can articulate our current position, I think steering is supportive of SIG-Kate's infra exploring this with with the understanding that, yeah, we need to take a look at requirements. We need to take a look at the dependencies on different release aspects in determining scope. And then once we have those pieces, then we can go and talk to vendors, and there will definitely need to be a flushed out plan that steering will need to look at and review prior to us actually enacting anything. Is that
so
everybody else's understanding?
So I think the big thing for me is I'd like to see the funding issue opened up and kind of everything that we have existing tied to that, at least so we have like the main breadcrumb for steering.
Yeah, so there is an issue already in the steering repo on that. I don't have a strong feeling of whether it resides in steering or funding, considering like funding, you know, I think more focused on funding were like our funding asks to the CNCF,
us to the community,
where we're actually
kind of,
specifically asking for money. But I don't have a strong feeling either way.
If we've got something existing in either, then I think it's fine, just as long as we're linking back all of the more technical conversations to it.
Okay. Sounds great. So Dims or anyone else have any other final comments on this before we move on? Great. Thank you so much, everyone, for the discussion on that. The next topic we have here is annual reports. I think you added this one, Paris.
Yep. But we should do it at the end if we don't have any other business. Do we have any other business? It doesn't look like it on the agenda.
Yeah, I don't see anything else on the agenda. Is there anything anybody else wants to bring forward?
Oh, I have one thing. I think I've talked to a few of you about this, but I think we need to work out with the CNCF a block of KubeCon tickets that leads can give out to identified members that need them. I know we have the scholarship for attendance, but sometimes people don't need like a full flight and hotel for a week, and maybe just like a ticket can help out. So we can give out a lot more tickets than we can full scholarships.
Yeah, we had a discussion about this years back, and I had an issue opened at least for the release team. I'm not sure where we landed on that, or if we had a resolution for it. So it's worth, I think it's worth digging back up.
The answer from the CNCF last time was to just have them fill out the scholarship thing anyway and put a note in it.
But let's do something better than that. I'm tired of that.
Yeah, we can do better.
Done. Yeah, like that is a very specific purpose for underrepresented folks. And I feel like getting those two things confused added to the mix of the confusion. And like contributors are like, you're telling me to fill out a diversity thing. I'm like, a white male, what are you talking about? So yeah, I definitely think we need a new process for that.
And this specific contributor that I was trying to get a ticket for did not get one after filling out. He applied for every scholarship and did not get one. So they wound up having to buy their own ticket.
Yeah. So one thought here is, sorry, go ahead, Tim.
Yeah. I feel like in the past, we've had some back and forth where the foundation has really felt like, and this is maybe echoed in some of our other conversations that we're trying to take to the governing board right now, but this notion that, well, their employer should pay for their ticket. I'm guessing that these are people specifically where that's not appropriate, but can you give some detail on the particular ones you've seen, Eddie?
Yeah, so this was a particular new grad who was contributing while in school, and they were doing a job that was not Kubernetes related after graduating. So their employer had no incentive to send them for KubeCon. So yeah, they had to shoulder it.
I feel like if we make a point of being a little more clear that that's such a normal scenario, maybe we'd get some different traction, but we need the foundations to better understand that this isn't always a situation where you have a industry professional with an industry relevant job and employer, that they're doing something out of their own personal goodness for the community, and that we have to have a way of supporting them.
So I see that there is still, so I linked in the chat the SIG release tracking issue for it, as well as the steering one. I see the steering one is still open and it's actually assigned to me, so I can take that action.
So one feedback. So in the past, when somebody said that they don't have a ticket or something like that, we used to point them to Chris Anichek, and Anichek would just behind the scenes handle it. So that has worked in the past many times, like including full scholarships. So we won't get a block of tickets from them. The best way to do this is how are they, what is their community role, and then what do they need? And if we have a list of those, we can, I don't see any problems in getting this thing in CNCF.
Yeah, I think it's a leads to it's a contributors to leads to steering to LF. I'm also guilty of the like texting Chris for something like workflow, but we can get something a little better. I think as long as people are routing, we know that the route is available. Community contributors know that the route is available to them via their leads, and the leads are getting that information up to steering.
So for this round, can we do something really simple, like when you know somebody who needs a ticket, drop an email to steering private, and we'll like bunch it up together and take it to CNCF.
Or we create a form that routes to steering private, and we give that form to all the leads.
Yeah.
And then the leads can fill it out. And then the leads can tell people that they have that there might be tickets available. But I feel like that still sounds very one-off-ish.
Let's do it once, and then we'll see what to do for KubeCon NA.
Exactly, Jordan, if only.
Cool.
Who wants to do the form? That's action.
So I've still got this issue assigned to me. I can work on the form. Paris, you're raising your hand too.
I'll help you for sure.
Yeah. Who I remember at some point I had access to Kubernetes Survey Monkey. I don't know if that's still true because it was a while back, but I can poke at it.
Only 3 of us do, and I'm one of them. So
okay.
we can figure it out.
Sounds good.
There are other complications to that account too, because if it sees you logging in from one location, it logs you, it puts you out.
Yeah, it's not a team account. Yeah.
Okay, so Stephen is going to take point on this one as far as the action items and stuff coming out of it, and I think kind of what has happened in the past, at least what I see on this, like it comes up usually right before KubeCon, and then we're really busy, and then we're dealing with KubeCon, and then KubeCon is over, and then we promptly forget about it for some number of months.
It sounds like there are elections too.
Christoph, it was mostly because of CNCF dragging its feet on having a separate path for getting these requests, and they're always happy to do the one-off things. They just didn't want it structured for some reason.
But I think if we basically make a very structured ask of the CNCF, then they have to respond in a structured way. And it's like, no, we're not asking for one-offs anymore. We're past KubeCon. Can we look at a more structured program to do this, or at least like a structured path, even if it's not like they pre-allocate blocks, but it's like notes written down somewhere that like if the steering committee or a SIG lead or whoever is able to have the CNCF, and the CNCF has already said yes to it.
Yeah, I think it is also because of the scalability issue, because if they do this structured thing for us, then they have to do the structured thing for all CNCF projects, right? So that is probably behind some of these pushbacks as well. But yeah, let's try to do what we can for NA, and then for EU, and then negotiate for NA.
Okay, sounds great. Any last comments on this one? Thank you so much, Eddie, for bringing it up and spurring the discussion. We've definitely gone on around the loop a couple of times on this one. Okay. So being that we have about 22 minutes left, and we wanted to spend at least 15 minutes on the annual reports, I'll say, is there anything else very quick that we want to bring up and deal with? Or should we move on to the annual report discussion? Okay. So based on that, we'll move on.
Dim's hand up.
Sorry, what was that, Tim?
Dim's hand is up. I'm not sure if it's just a stale hand up from before.
It was a stale one, sorry.
Okay, great. So we'll move on to annual reports. Paris, did you want to frame the discussion? What you want us to talk about today?
Yep. So we are officially in the process for getting the summary together. I created the HackMD. I'll put it in the chat too. 1 second. There we go. And we pretty much need to populate this at this point. So if y'all have completed merged annual reports at this point, this is for you, or even if you're seeing stuff that would be a theme for things that aren't merged, that's still fine too. But our major responsibility as liaisons is to make sure that the themes for your groups are represented on here, as well as anything else that you're seeing that falls under these headings. And I also need someone to help me with this. So I need a partner in crime for the summary. Any takers?
I can help. It'll need to be like when I get back.
When do you get back?
When I'm done moving, sorry.
Okay.
I can help out.
Okay, Stephen, so you'll help me until Bob can help. All right.
Yeah.
Yay. All right. Well, since you have really good scripting skills, maybe you can help me with the one part, which is to get like all the stuff under the headings with like help wanted and stuff like that merged in so that we're not doing manual work. So that's number one that you could help out with.
Sure. I can't believe you said on a recording call that I have good skill. Now I'm worried.
Well, okay. How about that? They're better than mine. All of your skills are, that's where my bar is right now. So
I'm down. We'll chat offline.
Yeah, we'll chat offline about that part. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, actually, Christoph, can you share the host share screen thingy with me?
Sure can. One moment.
Thanks. Pass me that potato.
There you go.
All right, potato passed. All right, here we go. All right. So we've got our summary right here. So again, the top line items that we need to look out for are accolades, themes, growth areas, help wanted, current initiatives, and terminology. I added the terminology section down here. This is something that we didn't do last year, but Celeste and I in the editorial process did, because we went through and saw that there was a bunch of acronyms and stuff like that people might not know, like SIG. I mean, we know that, but if there's anything else from like acronyms that y'all are pulling and things that you feel like need to be explained better, please add them. We'll of course use the blurb that we had last year, which again is like SIGs and working groups and governance and stuff like that. So add that to the bottom if you have anything. But so you can see right here some of the themes that I was seeing already. One is the theme of our independent contributors are still riding pretty high in a lot of these groups, meaning like number 3 and number 4 spots for top contributors in each group has an independent label. which I think is still pretty strong, meaning like that's people that aren't necessarily supported by major employers and or have benefits, et cetera. And then every group that I have looked at needs at least one area that needs help. And what that help is, like, we need to define that, obviously. And then that's like the two that I've seen. And I think we need to ride at least four themes. And same with the current initiatives. They'll be populated from the report. So that's nothing necessarily from us. Anything that has like, we need to do something, like as in steering, and not necessarily a scripted, a back script or whatever else. It says steering underneath the section. Any questions about like what y'all need to do or give for the summary? And then the first question from like a working session perspective is, have you seen any themes? Positive, negative, or neutral? I see a thinking face on Jordan.
I'm just trying to think of synthesizing stuff across groups. Like every group has their own things. A meta theme is that everyone's either really busy or really fragmented right now, and so even just the pace at which these are coming in and feedback loops are happening is that's a meta theme. I feel it myself.
And that's good. That's exactly, and we can both describe these, and obviously with more words later on, and get better words. Not for.
I guess one thing I saw in the groups that I've been working with, they were doing fewer things, but more of the things were either focused on like graduating existing stuff or really thinking through sort of end-to-end stories. So I felt like there was lower volume, but higher quality.
I think that was actually a theme last year as well, I think. So repeat the last thing that you just said, something about quality.
Lower volume, but higher quality. So instead of, hey, we did 10 new alpha things, it was like, we graduated a couple things and we got one new alpha thing in flight, but we actually have a design like for all the way to GA for this thing.
Yep. Getting out the report from last year. So I think that was one of ours, which is still good because that can be a theme, is that we have a consistent element here.
There were a couple things that happened last year, which was the production readiness review and the no permanent beta APIs. So there were a couple of sort of strategic requirements that were put in place. And the hope was that it would spur this sort of higher level of maturity or stability. So from what I've seen, that seems to be paying off, maybe not 100%, but at least directionally, it seems good.
It might even be related to the prior one, as we're all feeling swamped and burned out and drained in various degrees. One of the best coping strategies is to simplify and focus, and where that can be like, how do we just get this thing done finally? And yeah, it's.
Could that be a growth area, Tim? Could that be like an area of growth for us?
I mean, I think as a leader or an engineering leader, this is one of the things you learn across your career, is how you manage and deal with these complex stresses. And maybe that is something we're seeing ourselves learn and operationalize better. Although I would say personally, I am failing at it.
And so speaking of growth areas, or last year growth areas were things like we needed to focus on reliability. That's when, the proposal went out, and, so maybe we could have some kind of theme that would follow up on this. The words we used, all eyes on security, and then improving KEPs. Those were our growth areas last year. And the words that we use.
Yeah, the reliability aspect, I do feel like there were a lot of regression releases recently, like over the last 3 to 6 months. 122 had some high profile regressions that actually still haven't been resolved. There were at least 1 or 2 in 123 as well. So I feel like that's probably an area of growth, like in the design and graduation phases. I think I've seen clear growth, but in the test quality and avoiding regressions, I think that's probably still something that we need to focus on.
Thanks for whoever's taking that note. All right.
If you put it to do, I can
Yeah.
mention a few specifics. I hate specifics because I feel like it calls people out. One of the specifics was something I reviewed and I missed it, so I'm happy to call myself out.
That's what I usually do. I usually just like see my bad behavior, don't do this.
Yeah. So like I've seen actually some pushback on the reliability proposal recently, and like I hear the concerns that are being expressed on that in terms of like we don't want to disincentivize people, we don't want to discourage people, we don't want to be punitive or punish contributors, but I think that is addressing issues that are real issues, and so I don't want to see that effort lose steam.
So I would say, related to reliability, I think people have not spent enough time looking at it. I can say as one of the sponsor chairs that like we have not spent enough time looking at that. So I think raising visibility there, if it's going to improve reliability across the project, is really important.
Would you say raising visibility on all issues is a growth area, or you feel like just this one issue?
So I think if you raise visibility on all issues, then it becomes noisy, right?
Yes,
so like
yeah.
finding what the right things to raise visibility on, and if you like, what are the lowest cost, highest impact things we can raise visibility on, right? If it's a small change that has a possibility to ripple out through the community, whether it's like improving triage, for example, right? If there's a situation where because we've talked about triage party in the past, we've talked about board management, we've talked about automating things like that. That's something that maybe it's a few tweaks that causes a huge impact on being able to just be productive, right? I think if we can find more of those things, we should target them. I think reliability is definitely one of them, though.
If we want to prioritize things that are most user visible. So like reliability has two aspects. One is on contributors and one is on users. And from the user perspective, I think things that actually make it into a release and get marked as a regression, like that's a really clear signal of something that like whatever processes we had missed this thing,
fell over,
test coverage or whatever. Like, so highlighting that from a user perspective seems like a good idea. And then I think there are thinking from the contributor perspective, burnout or like being overwhelmed or like not being sure if what you're doing is making things better or worse because tests are flaky. Like there's a few different things we could.
Yeah, so so I kind of leaned more towards the contributor maintainer side here because like we're always going to ship regardless of like when it happens, how it happens, like it's like we're going to ship the thing. Right. The quality level of it is going to be different depending on how focused maintainers are at any one point in time. Right. Like there are going to be things that we're going to miss. There are always going to be things that we're going to miss. But like I think the process improvements, like improving quality of life for the maintainers, because we're always going to ship, like that'll have a better impact on the end user experience.
Will we always ship?
We always ship. We will always ship.
Yeah, I think that the key is making it so that it doesn't require intense 100% of the time focus from maintainers to avoid regressing. Like we places where we have seen regressions show that like we didn't have systems in place to protect us. And so if we had a busy week or month and lost focus, like something slipped through. And so rather than saying like, we need to respond to that by just being focused for the next release, it's like, well, what can we put in place to like help ourselves, help protect us?
Yeah, I'm less interested in the focus. I think the focus is important, but I'm more interested in the system. What system can we put in place for sure?
Yeah.
Anything else, Bob? What do you think about like themes and growth areas and stuff that you've seen? Or anybody else that hasn't talked? I don't need to call you out specifically. Dims, you, Christoph, you, anybody? And obviously this is ongoing, so I'm not necessarily putting you on the spot for deadline now. But anything that you want to like talk about too while we have all of us here?
I think the number of people who can spend 9 to 5 all week long on Kubernetes is kind of over. We need to call that out. And
yep, I agree.
We need, we have to, like, kicking or screaming will go to a thing where people are only able to work on Kubernetes a few hours a day, a few days a week. And we have to adjust better than what we are already doing.
What about the other theme, and ironically that I had like DM'd Bob earlier about like honestly 3 different archive things. Like, one was about like best practice, like there was just all different situations with 3 different people in the project. I'm noticing, so my theme here is I'm noticing that we're archiving more. Is that true or false? Both process. You think that's false?
No, I don't think we're archiving more. As the person that probably does at least the archiving of the GitHub repos, I'd say it's pretty, like there hasn't been a large influx in them.
But that's
I will
also
say
the
that there
repo
are,
again. That's not necessarily sub projects.
I think we're getting better at burning down the backlog of things that have to be archived, maybe, right? Because like I think there was like a chunk of things that we were already planning to do that are kind of like happening, right, or have happened at this point, as opposed to like this is a need. But I think as we're doing annual reports, as we're kind of like checking in with SIGs and governance groups more frequently, we're getting a better signal on like what is and isn't working, right? If it's a sub project, if it's a working group, and we've been a bit more proactive about saying like, all right, well, let's shut it down. Like
Yep.
This goes back to the idea of we're all busy and spread so thin. At some point, if we've gone through the annual review process once or twice and said like, yeah, we intend to get to this, we intend to get to this, but you know what, it's not. Let's go ahead, and it's not that it's not important, but it's clearly not staffed. It's not something we've got the bandwidth for now. Let's take it off the list so that we're not stressing over not delivering it.
It almost seems like good sustainability question stuff though, like that's the, like that's almost kind of like the answer to the DIMS, like we're not a 9 to 5. Yeah, that's kind of where my mind was going with that as well. Like we're not a 9 to 5, and here's some of the things that like you can see that we're doing, like, people are thinking about archiving more and how to automate themselves out of their contributor job and, yada, yada, yada.
So I think there's also like a making sure that the record is visible about how we're doing this stuff, because there's also like just because we needed to archive it doesn't mean that it's not necessarily important,
Right.
Like we should provide a route for a group of intrepid contributors to potentially re-raise something. Like we've talked about, we had a licensing subproject, for example, in the past, right? And it was kind of like us occasionally poking Steve Winslow when he was at the LF and going like, does this like look, you know, but it wasn't like a constant need, right? Let's say we did have folks who cared about that, right? Or say there were licensing issues popping up more frequently. There should still be a, like, here was the decision record at point in time X, so we decided to shut this down. This is why. If you wanted to pick it up, here are some suggestions about what you would do, right? And how it needs to be staffed to be successful moving forward.
Could one of our themes and or growth areas be things like flaky tests still suck? Or like anything like that that y'all are seeing?
Yeah, I think that's always going to be a need. There are, for Kubernetes in particular, you run into this very interesting, fun, weird thing where there's several of the subdirectories that are owned that are not really owned. I think someone asked the question recently about like the build directory, right? And we have several folks on the call who are all reviewers, approvers for the build directory, but it doesn't necessarily land on, you know, the question got asked in SIG release, and it doesn't land on SIG release, and it doesn't really land on SIG testing. It lands on those reviewers, approvers, right? So that you know, there a lot of the things that are owned as a result of like being in a subdirectory that does not have clear ownership. You've got instances where there are tests that run off of that, or you've got instances where you've got, like, if you think about all of the generated tests across just Kubernetes, that like a new release branch spins up or something, and there are new generated tests that don't necessarily get the attention that they need to you know, for us to have that clear signal of like, do we release or not, right? That's worth investigating, right? And that's not just a SIG release thing. That's not a SIG testing thing. That is like, that's everyone. It's like we either decide that we're going to have clear ownership of each of these directories from a SIG, or we say that it's a group effort and figure out who the group is to staff it.
And anybody else have any other themes or growth areas?
So
Yep.
yeah,
We're at time.
at time, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, well,
I'm like going in. I'm like, hold up, hold up,
Oh, God.
hold up.
Was a great discussion. I'm going to step in just to wrap this up. Thank you, everybody, for attending. If there's any follow-up items, you could reach out in our Slack channel, hashtag steering committee, or you can reach us at steering committee repo on GitHub, or lastly, steering@kubernetes.io. Thanks so much, everyone. See you next month.
Take it easy.